This wasn't the worst episode in the series, but it definitely wasn't the best. It is somewhere in between. So we're going to get into it. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Starting off, Jen does not care about doors at all. I really love the relationship between Jennifer and Luke. It's absolutely hilarious when they interact with each other. The banter between the two just keeps me laughing pretty much the entirety of the time.
Oh my god. Is the hag convention in town?
The introduction of Daredevil wasn't too bad as well. Charlie Cox as Matt Murdock / Daredevil is still spot on casting. There was definitely some chemistry between Jen and Matt for sure. But one of the things that I thought was a negative in the show was the combat. Now, it's hard not to compare this version of Daredevil to the Netflix's version of Daredevil, even though I know I shouldn't, but I could not help myself. The Netflix Daredevil is peak writing and peak acting. This was the show for some people that introduced them to Daredevil. This is a show that introduced them to the grittiness of the character and the emotional take on a superhero character. They pulled it off surprisingly well. The combat in the show, it was very visceral, it was gritty in all aspects, and it really pushed that TVMA rating that it got. As compared to the TV 14 rating that She-Hulk has, it was apparent that some things had to change when introducing such a gritty character into this universe. Now, discussing this episode with a friend of mine, we got onto the topic of the combat and how disappointed I was in it. Then he made a really good point about why the combat worked in this episode. And it was because they focused more on Daredevil's acrobatics than his fighting style. At this point, it started to click to me the more we had the conversation about this, and it started to make more sense. This was something that the Netflix show didn't really touch on. The combat was hard, gritty, visceral, and very well choreographed, but nothing to showcase his agility and his acrobatics. This was something in the comics that he utilized quite frequently, not just in combat, but for traversal through the city. And in this episode, it showed a slight hint of that. So the combat for me went from a negative to a slight positive. The CGI itself has gotten better, but it's still spotty in some shots of the episode. The close-up CGI shots are considerably better than what they were when the show launched, but the long shots, they still suffer from having a washed out look to Jen and some of the surrounding areas in the shot. Overall, though, the CGI has gotten considerably better, but it took them 8 episodes to get it somewhat right, and for me, that is still a problem. I know some people would say that it's just a TV show and not a movie, so it's to be expected. I beg to differ, because if you're going to go, whether it's a TV show or a movie, and you're going to use CGI as your main source for the character design, then it should be flawless. The idea that this is a TV show, not a movie, is absolutely unacceptable. If anything, the TV show CGI should always be as good or even better than their movie counterpart, because the set pieces in the TV show are smaller than the ones we get in the movies, and the CGI scenes are less utilized in a TV show than in a movie, which means they're smaller and they're more compact. And in this case, it's only utilized to show off Jen in certain aspects. So the quality of the CGI in a small compact form should always be as good as movie CGI or better. To recap on a lot of the good aspects of this episode, you've got Daredevil, which was a good introduction. You have the relationship between Jen and Luke, and the combat as well. Like I said, it shows off more of his acrobatics and agility than his brutal combat fighting style. And the CGI is continuing to improve. But we only got one more episode for this to continue to take effect. Now that we got the good stuff out of the way, let's move into some of the bad stuff. There's only 2 things in this category for me, and that's the plot and the pacing of the story. This was episode 8, and I still have no clue as to what's going on. We have 1 episode left in the series and nothing to show for plot depth and plot nuance. Episode 3, 4, and 5 were, in my opinion, wasted episodes that could have been combined into one episode, maybe two at the most. Other than that, the fact that Jen had to come to the realization that she actually liked and wanted the name She-Hulk, that's pretty much all we got with these 3 episodes. When you're going to have a sitcom style television show with 30-minute runtimes per episode, you can't afford to have 3 episodes wasted on filler. Episodes 6 and 7, titled Just Jen and the Retreat, did more for Jennifer's character development than the previous 5 episodes combined. We have gotten to episode 9. This is the season finale, and I have no idea who the threat is or why we have a threat, generally speaking. We have one episode to tie everything up, and I don't know how it's going to go. Now, I know I said I've got 2 items in this category, but I'm adding the walk of shame to this. This is more of a honorable mention because for me, I could care less about the scene. They didn't spend too much time on it at all, and I think for me, that's why it didn't bother me. I will say this though, had they made a huge scene about it or drug it on continuously, it probably would have been a point of contention for me at that point. But they only spent a few seconds on it. It was over and done with. So like I said, it didn't really bother me at all. But the show does have a track record for making men look bad, but I don't feel like this scene was one of them. So for me, like I said, I felt like it was done comedically and it didn't last very long. Let's move into the ugly portion of the show. Let's rip the band-aid straight off. I absolutely hated the look of Daredevil's suit and color scheme. Yes, the color scheme was comic accurate, but I still hated it. Maybe hate's a strong word. Let's say highly disliked. But I have to say this though, they did improve the look and the color scheme of the suit as opposed to what it looked like when Daredevil used it for his run in the comics. With that said, I still hated it. The Netflix suit was far superior aesthetically from the design standpoint and the color scheme. Now, the yellow and red was used originally by Daredevil and was made from his father's boxing ring attire, whereas you got the red and the yellow as his tights and his pants. So I'm assuming this was the same reason we have the yellow and red suit now in the show. So I do respect the comic accurate attire, but I still don't like it. The other question is, will we be seeing this suit used in the Daredevil Born Again series? Most likely, so no matter how much I don't like it, I better get used to it. Overall, this episode wasn't too bad. I still think they need better writers for sure, but I'd say this episode was one of the better ones in the series. And as far as where we go from here, we'll just have to wait and see what the season finale brings to the table. Well, that's it for the video, guys. I do think this episode wasn't bad at all. They still have a lot of work to do with the writing aspect. So this show for me has been a real struggle. I see the groundwork and I see just the roots of a show that can be really good. We just need better writers on this, man. But we'll see what the season finale has to offer next week. Until next time, guys, my name's Lincoln. This is the RPG Show. Like, comment, sub, and I'm out. Peace.